which was a really popular article amongst all of us, poses the issue as a question, or I'm sorry, a problem. Recognizes this problem with abusers and family court mediations getting custody or parenting time, and it's not, they find they're not looking at the best interest of the child in these cases. So here the issue was posed as a problem, but it wasn't nearly as explicit in the last article. You had to do a little bit more reviewing, right? In some of your articles, you're probably gonna have to require a little bit more of a careful read, maybe even a reread. And this was one of those that it probably helped to look at it again. Some of them, you might be able to know right away the key elements just from the abstract. That's fine. Really, if you can do that at this point, you can figure out the key aspects and then come to it later, right, to determine, okay, well, this looked like it would be a helpful article. I'll come back to it later when I have more time to look at it. But some, they're really going to require you to comb through and figure out what's all going on. Because again, at first glance, this might look like there's a problem. It might just look like a general problem of domestic violence, right? But the real problem here is that there's a lack of resources in the court system to manage this, right? That's the real root problem. It's much narrower than a broader issue of, domestic violence in the court system. Any questions? Okay, so let's change gears a little bit. Because I think, can everyone see this okay? Is it kind of faded? Okay. So take a look at this and tell me what you see. I might just start. Yes?
It's downtown Portland.
It's downtown Portland. You know that. How many of you didn't know that? Okay, what else do you see? Literally.
A mountain.
Mountain. Mount Hood, probably some of you reference. Trees.
A city.
A city. Okay, more broadly. So, about, what does this look like?
That might be fall time.
Might be fall time. Good. Anything else? Jump out. The obvious stuff. This chapel here.
There's hills in the background.
Hills in the background. Be a nice place to be right now. Fall, Portland, or fall, yeah, Portland during fall. So some of you recognize this right away. Oh, that's Portland, right? How could you tell it was Portland?
I grew up there.
Perfect. There's some, maybe if you grew up there, some, even just a building might be recognizable, right?
The skyline, you could pick it out normally.
Totally. I mean, maybe Mount Hood, the skyline, some, specific building. It's pretty obvious, right? But maybe not some of you, right? Because some of you might have attached different meaning to this. How does this picture make you feel? Just instinctively, just throw it out there. I won't judge you, or I'll pick on you. I already said, oh, it makes me
Happy.
happy. How about you? You're not.
Excited for warm weather.
Excited for warm weather. Okay. How about you? It's your home, right?
Yeah.
How does it make you feel?
It makes me a little nostalgic because I haven't been home in a while.
That might be different for someone who's never been there. Or, is anyone else here from Portland? How does that make you feel?
It makes me excited because I'm going to this weekend.
Professor Whitten, you're from Portland. How does this make you feel?
I like it. It's nice. It's a nice picture.
So, I know. Portland, I know. Portland, I love Portland. So I like this picture. But maybe if I looked at it on a different day, I'd attach different meanings to it. So there's some things here that look very obvious. Okay, there's a mountain and buildings. Some it's obviously important, but some of it's not, right? You need the extra context. So let's look at another picture. What do you see here? Obvious stuff. Starry Night. Van Gogh. What about some other things? Obvious things. What do you see?
Not as detailed.
No. Good. We're gonna get back to that. What is this thing right here?
It's a cypress.
I didn't know that until I joined into another
I
class.
thought it was a big pillar of flame when I was a student, and then I realized, no, it's a cypress.
I've always thought it was like a castle.
Mm-hmm. That's what I thought. Or like maybe a craggy kind of like rock or something. There's a chapel here. Some hills in the background. Looks like a little village. Any other obvious things that jump out at you?
The colors.
The colors on blues and white. Can you tell if it's daytime or night? Well, I gave it away, right? How many do you think it could be daytime? Kind of, yeah. So I showed this for some people like, oh, it looks like waves, like a tsunami rolling over a town. That's interesting. I can see that. But how does this make you feel? How many like this? Makes you feel good. How many don't? Yeah, some people say, yeah, why don't you like it?
It's like dark and
Yeah.
sad.
It feels sad.
Dark.
Dr. Brown, how come you like it?
I just love it. I've always loved it. I have a copy of it at home. The colors, I love the colors and the swirls. I think it's happy.
I think that once you know the connotations and the context behind it, though, like you can't uncontext it, though. Like when you know, like how really tormented he was,
I know.
it kind of, I don't know. I mean, it makes it kind of sad. It's kind of tainted after
Go to the
that.
dark place.
Right. It has a dark
Issues.
place. Painful thinking.
How many? Yes.
I actually find it hopeful because he painted it while he was in recovery when he was actually getting help for his multitude of issues where it was very real for him, but it's also was on his road to recovery and part of recovery is very broken.
Cool. Maybe just having a little bit of extra context maybe change your perspective on this too. You're like, oh, there's some depth lines. That's interesting. Maybe I kind of find it more intriguing. Or maybe not. Maybe I think it's really dark now. But what I want you to kind of take away from this is that we can all look at the same images, right? Some are more detailed, some are more blurry. I want to get to this. But we can all attach different meaning, right? Even to the more explicit, right? Obvious picture, okay, so something that is obviously Portland. To many of you, it's probably obviously a city with a mountain in the background. This, it's open to more interpretation, right? Think about, but you all can still attach different meaning to it. Maybe less so with the more detailed, explicit photo, but still, a lot of you found different aspects of it that stood out, different levels of importance. Think of this, apply this when you start researching and looking at your materials, right? You all could look at the same article, which you have in class, but certain things stand out to you that you might think is cool and you might have thought was irrelevant, right? And we're generally working more in the explicit category with scholarly works, right? With professional works, with scholarly works, it's generally going to be more clear or obvious as to what the author's trying to convey. They try to lay that out for you in a very obvious and organized way, so you adopt or at least see the viewpoint that they're trying to express. That's not always the case with art. How many of you are art majors or something related? I know one. What about ENDA or theater? Okay. Well, I'm surrounded by a lot of artistic people. I don't consider myself artistic at all, but I love analyzing art, right? Because who thinks they can pinpoint the singular meaning of this? Probably not. You can probably interpret this in a lot of different ways. Maybe the artist had no intent, right? Had no specific message that they wanted to convey, but just, hey, look at it and enjoy it and come up with something on your own. And you can, with your annotated references, you have the option for 2 different sources to look at something other than a scholarly peer-reviewed work. You could use a government document, right, like a court case or a statute. You can look at a novel or a piece of art. You can include that as a source for your analysis. And you can still apply this issue, premise, and conclusion and bias to this, right? It might not be so obvious, but you totally can. It's just that you're going to have to work a little harder to explain how you identify the issue and conclusion, right? You'll have to rationalize, well, this is darkness, right? Or this means hopelessness, right? Because the author or the artist used darker colors. There's this kind of, intimidating cypress that means all these things about death, or you could adopt a different viewpoint, right? It's more how you explain it, interpret it. Because really with art, there's really no right or wrong answer to your identification of the meaning. So, you're going to start looking at sources, and you're going to look at them individually, but I want you to start looking at them in totality, together, right? Because this is going to be the foundation for your argument. And you don't have to come up with that argument at this point, you're just in the exploratory phase. But as you look at different materials, start thinking how they will help support your different, help support one of your main points or arguments. And you don't want to do that in piecemeal, right? You don't want to say, well, blue is the best color to paint your office because it has a calming effect, it makes you smart, and it's cheap. Like, those are my 3 premises. Okay, well imagine I'm going to disagree with you. I'm the other interior designer who's like, no, I disagree with you, I want your job, and I think red is going to be the best color because it's empowering, and it's only a little bit more expensive, and it'll make you more efficient. All right, so what I just did there is I laid out all my evidence in piecemeal. It's going to be really easy to knock it out one by one. you have no foundation for your argument to stand. So as you're in this process of reading and researching and starting to pick apart materials, think about how they work together, right? That's why next week you're going to do what's called an analogy. Two sources, right? So find two. You can find two that might look familiar or might look related, but they don't necessarily have to be, because you can draw this analogy even if they're pretty distinct. And if you're looking at something related to the same topic, it's probably going to be fairly easy to analogize. But this is the process of getting them cohesive, right? Connecting them to not just make these individual pieces of evidence in, as standalone pieces of evidence, but joining them together to make a solid foundation for your argument. So, and you're all familiar with analogy, right? But you've done it more in the illustrative context. So just to review, these are distinct examples that you're comparing, but they share some sufficiently similar aspect. And that might not always be obvious. In fact, the best analogies is when you're able to draw some similarity between two very, very different examples or phenomena. So we've looked at it mostly in the illustrative context, right? You've all done your Crucible mass hysteria papers. Right? Love that assignment. How many of you recall the story of the Crucible, either the play or the film? Can we give us a little background on it? Refresh our memories?
Well, there were some girls, and then they got caught doing something they weren't supposed to, and then they started blaming everybody in the whole town and turned to a witch hunt.
Yes, that's where we get, this idea of witch hunt to our lexicon. So, it's the story on the Salem witch trials, right? And it's often compared to the McCarthy era, right? The actual play was inspired by the McCarthy, right? The scare